So you're ready for a second home, but you're not quite sure what type of home to buy, what you want to do with it. Well, I've got some ideas for you, so let's get into it. Hey guys, how you doing? Werenka here from Simply Home. I'm a state of Michigan broker, and I've got an all-star team. So whether you're looking to buy, sell, invest, rent, whatever you need, we've got you covered. We even do property management now. So if you've watched this channel for any length of time, I'm sure you've gotten the idea that I work with a lot of investors. I do a lot of investment properties, things like that. But most of the time my videos are kind of geared more towards, rental, buy and hold, sometimes fix and flip, things like that. But there's like a whole galaxy of different ways that you can make a second property your own. So let's talk about some of those. We will talk about rentals too because I have to, because that's just me. But there's a few different ways that you can buy that second home, different ways to use it. So we'll talk about the pluses and minuses of each of those different ways. So the first type of second home that I want to talk about is lake houses and cabins. And coming to you as someone who in the last year has purchased one of those, and I'm fairly obsessed with it, I can definitely tell you it's in the right circumstance, it's an awesome move and an awesome thing to have. Now, the beauty of it, especially in Michigan, we have such a wealth of different, types of areas that you can purchase in. So unless you're looking for like something up in the mountains, which I guess in the UP we sort of have mountains, but not really, or like in the desert or something, like we can pretty much accommodate you here in Michigan. And the beauty of it is the price range on this type of property goes from very, very affordable to, obviously if you get some mansion on, acreage on a lake, you're probably gonna be paying an exorbitant amount of money for it. But the moral of the story is for any budget, you can pretty much pick up something that will work for you. So it's relatively easy to find somewhere in Michigan, if whether you're looking for something like on a river, something with a pond, something on a lake, whether it's an inland lake or a Great Lake, or just simply like a secluded cabin out in the woods, we've got something for you. Pretty much any of those scenarios can be doable. And then the other great thing about it is, like, if you really think about it, even in Metro Detroit, you don't have to get too far outside of the city to be in areas that are like fairly rural. So you don't really have to get something that's hours and hours and hours away from your main home in order to have a vacation property or just somewhere to get away. Like, just as an example, like for us, the right fit was where our second home is about 100 miles from Ferndale, so it takes about just over 2 hours to get there, which is the perfect distance for us and for me personally, because if I can go up, get away, feel like I'm away, out of the city, away from everything, but I'm close enough that if I absolutely had to come back, I can jump in the car, be back in Detroit in a relatively short amount of time. But I have other, friends and clients who own their, vacation lake houses that are, 4 hours away. So that's a commitment. When you're going to go to the cottage, you're going to spend, minimum of several days there, because, that's not quite as easy to just turn around and come back from. But the moral of the story is, like, in the state of Michigan, especially if you live in the Detroit area, like, you can, in less than an hour, be out of the city, somewhere out in nature, on a lake, you name it, you can do that. Or if you want to go the other direction and just be as far away as possible, like, Michigan's a deceptively large state, and if you're heading like northwest, to get to, the far western edge of the UP from Detroit is about an 11 or 12 hour drive. So, you name it. You can pretty much find anything you want, any type of property, virtually any price point within the state of Michigan. So it makes it really nice to be able to have this advantage here. And we have so many lakes, so much water, so many rivers, that it's really advantageous to be located here in Michigan for this type of property. And the best thing about it, having a second home that's a little bit further away, is when you're not using it, you're going to have to check with your municipality to make sure this is doable. but you could use it as a short-term rental. Let your friends and family use it and make money off it that way. But essentially, if you play your cards right, and if you want to, if it's something that works for you, your second home can actually pay for itself. And that what's better than that? And so those are the pluses. Let's talk. There is some downside to having a property like this. So let's talk about it a little bit. So especially like the more rural you get, is something you have to think about. Is it's not quite as easy to have access to like Home Depot type stores, grocery stores, furniture stores, things like that. So you have to kind of take that into consideration, and it makes sense. Like the more rural you are too, if there's like one grocery store that there's not another one for like in a 20-mile drive or something like that, then your prices are going to be a little bit higher, because they can be. I mean, if you're the only game in town, you can pretty much set your price and everybody has to pay it. Plus, it's more expensive to ship everything up there than it would be for something in the Detroit area, where there's distribution centers right here, and the price is the price, and there's more competition. So something to think about. Most of these little towns have like a hardware store. It'll be an Ace or a True Value or whatever. But that being said, the prices on those in those places are significantly higher than a Home Depot or a Lowe's or Menards or what have you. So just something to think about. It's not as easy as pushing a button on your phone and your groceries show up an hour later when you're living 4 hours away from Metro Detroit. But as long as you take that into consideration when you're doing your planning and deciding where you want to be, as long as it works for you, then it works. And then the other thing to think about is now you own two homes, and maybe neither one of them are income properties. But so there's going to be capital expenditures on both of those. So now you've got two furnaces, you've got two hot water heaters, you got two roofs. So just keep that in mind when you're budgeting for. Hopefully you never run into some crazy repairs. But it's like if the furnace goes out here in Ferndale, I can make a couple phone calls, even if it's 2 a.m, and get somebody out in relatively short order. Probably not going to be the same if you're out in a cabin in the middle of the woods in the middle of nowhere. There might only be 1 or 2 people that do HVAC work, even remotely close to you, and more than likely you're not going to get them out on a moment's notice. So you just need to think about that. Just keep that in the back of your mind when you're planning where you want to be, and just make sure it's something that would work for you in case like the worst happens. And it's always, in my experience, when a furnace goes out, it's always going to be like 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday. It's never at a convenient time. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that you have that contingency worked out in some way, shape, or form, and you should be fine. And then, since this is my channel, the next type of second home to buy, we're going to talk about rental properties, because that's what I do. We'll talk about long-term versus short-term rentals. So obviously the pluses to an investment property, whether it's short-term or long-term, is significant positive cash flow, just passive income, all the reasons that we always talk about for doing this type of property. And then another positive, whether it's long-term or short-term, you can always hire somebody else to take care of it for you and manage it for you. So literally all you have to do is sit back and collect money. You can hire somebody to place a tenant for you. You can hire somebody to do maintenance. You can hire somebody to do monthly management on it, and you can hire somebody to collect rent. So literally all you have to do is get a direct deposit once a month into your account, boop, and you're good to go. And that's whether it's short-term or long-term. And then, we've got any number of videos on this channel about long-term rental properties. We don't talk as much about short-term rentals, and that would be Airbnbs or VRBOs. And, I've got significant experience in getting those up and running off the ground, too. I've gotten 4 of them up off the ground in my career. 2 of them we ended up selling, 2 of them we still manage. And we've got 1 in Ferndale, 1 in Pleasant Ridge. And, those, when they're getting booked, they have the opportunity to provide significant, like exponentially more monthly income than a long-term rental. Because, that's just, you're going to sign a lease. It is what it is. It has to be competitive with the rest of the homes in the neighborhood. But a short-term rental is like, somebody's coming into town for 2 days and they need a place to stay. You can set your price there. Now, obviously, the trade-off to that is, especially in a city like Ferndale where there's a ton of Airbnbs, you're still competing against the other Airbnbs in the area. But, realistically, like this time of year, middle of July, middle of the summer, most Airbnbs around town are completely booked up, and ours are no exceptions. But then you got to take the trade-off. Like fast forward 6 months when we're January, February, we'll get bookings for sure, but it might be just enough to cover the the monthly maintenance cost of the property. You pay for the utilities, you're paying your debt service if you have a mortgage, so you'll probably be able to like cover your basic expenses, but you're not going to turn a massive profit usually that time of year. But all things considered, either one's a great option, and you can always try your hand at a short-term rental property. If you don't like it, you just find a tenant long-term, move them in, and you're good. So you don't really have to do anything different with the property. So I'm always talking up the pluses on rental properties. Let's talk minuses. Let's dig into that for a minute. And really, for as far as short-term rental properties go, that's the big one because not every municipality allows them. So that's the number one thing you need to look into before you're potentially going to purchase one, is if you even can run one in that city. Like for example, I know like St. Clair Shores doesn't allow them. I believe the Grosse Pointes don't allow them. Detroit, I think on paper doesn't, but there's some kind of a workaround. I'm not really sure on that. But like for example, the cities that I'm super familiar with, Ferndale didn't used to have restrictions on them, but a few years ago they passed an ordinance, so now they do, to where like in Ferndale the restrictions are there can only be one Airbnb per block. Instead of biannual rental inspection, you have to get one every year. And if the neighbors complain too many times in a year, the city can come in and shut you down. So there's definitely that to be cognizant of. And then in Pleasant Ridge, the police department drives by the property, every Airbnb, once a day, at least once a day, if not more. Which, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, and the more eyes on a property that's potentially sitting there vacant, the better. But I do have to let my people that book it, I need to let them know, because we've had a couple instances where they've parked where they're not supposed to park, and we're extremely clear about where to park. But, if people have like had company over or something and somebody just parked in a spot where they're not supposed to and gotten a ticket. So we obviously don't want that to happen. So we just need to keep them aware of the situation so that it doesn't become a bigger issue. And with either kind of property, if you pay cash, you're good to go, because that cash flow is going to be there no matter what. So, for example, like I don't think we're in any kind of a risk of a massive real estate crash. You never know, it could happen. But let's take a look back at like 2007, 2008. And there were plenty of big-time landlords that had many rental properties, and the people that paid cash were able to, when the bottom fell out of the market and people were losing their jobs left and right, you can make that decision whether it's a better idea to find a new tenant. Say they can't pay their rent anymore, you might have to evict them. Do you evict them and find a different tenant, or do you just lower their rent? If they're a good tenant, you keep them in the house, and then when their circumstances, got better, then you raise the rent back up. You maybe don't have that option if you have a mortgage on the property. So say, if you own the property cash, you buy the house cash and you're renting it for $1,800 a month, and then there's something changes, or the market changes and you have to rent it for $1,500 a month. It's still all positive cash flow. It's obviously not as much as you were getting, but you're still making money on that property. Whereas if you get a mortgage on the property and say your monthly expenses are $1,000 a month on it, between property or principal, interest, tax, and insurance, and so you're renting that same house for $1,800, so your cash flowing $800 a month, which is still not bad. And then you have to lower the price down. Like at a certain point, if it gets if the market changes to the point where you're only going to bring in less than what you owe every month on it, then you have a decision to make. So that's what happened to a lot of people during the Great Recession. Was the landlords that owned everything free and clear were fine. The people that had mortgages all got foreclosed on because they couldn't continue to own that property. It didn't make sense anymore. So that's something to consider. Every person has a different risk tolerance. I just want to bring all the information to you so you can make a informed decision on your own, but that's definitely something to think about, whether that's a long-term or a short-term rental. So if say you own an Airbnb or a VRBO and you have a mortgage on it, if your bookings aren't where they need to be, you need to really make a decision of which way you want to go on that. And just a little, it's pretty much common sense, but when you first buy one, what I would recommend doing is pricing it below market for the area, just so you get a bunch of bookings in real quick. And that'll number one, will bring money in for you, but more importantly, you start getting those good reviews. And as by the time you get to like 8 to 10 5-star reviews on your property, then you can start inching the price up a little bit. And then people feel comfortable booking your home because they know that it's going to be a place that they want to stay themselves. So we talked cash flow potential on these rental properties, and then the last thing to think about as far as back to mortgages, whether it's short term or long term, your mortgage payment's going to tend to be higher on on an investment property more than it would be on your primary residence. And that's also the kind of the difference between like a second home, if you have like a lake home or you have a cottage somewhere out in the cabin out in the woods or whatever the case may be. As long as that property is 50 miles or more from your primary residence, it's actually considered a second home if you're not going to use it strictly for investment purposes. So you're going to be able to, the down payment's going to be lower, the interest rates will be lower, the guidelines are a little bit less stringent than if it's strictly an investment property. So you definitely need to make sure, if you're going to be buying one of these properties with a mortgage, make sure your lender actually knows that, because I think some of them don't. So if you do have any questions before we even get into that, I'm happy to give you a recommendation to my lender partner. He's absolutely phenomenal, and he's the one that brought this up to me when I was buying my second home. He made sure that we were getting the lowest rate and the lowest down payment possible for it to make our initial expenses less. So I'm all for everybody saving money. So just make sure that when you're buying that second home, that is how it is. That's the type of mortgage you're getting. And then with investment properties, it is what it is. You're going to have a higher down payment. The interest rate's going to be higher. Right now, this week, the average, 30-year fixed rate conventional is about 6.74, I think. So with a straight up investment property, everything is dependent on your income, your credit score, your reserves, all that stuff. But just all things being equal, if it's 6.74 for a primary residence, it might be 7.5 for an investment property. So just be ready for the initial, the interest rate and the initial expenses to be a little bit higher on an investment property as well. And then the third and final type of second home or vacation home that I want to talk about are snowbird homes or / retirement homes. And I'll go back to personal experience on this one too, because I've talked about this before, but I lived in Arizona for 5 years. That's where I went to college. And I've got a very up close and personal, education on snowbirds, because that is a massive component of the population of Arizona. And that's just people that, when they live up north, and then when it starts getting cold and snowy, they go to their house in the sun and enjoy the wintertime there. And so they never really have to deal with a bad winter or a bad summer. They can just kind of move back and forth and get the best of both worlds. And Arizona obviously is a massive state for that. So is Florida. So we'll talk a little bit about that, because that's definitely something to think about depending on where you're at, like what stage in life you're at. If that's something that's on the horizon or you're ready to make that move, let's talk about it so you have a little bit more information. So I guess right in the name snowbird, it implies that wherever you're going to move for that, unless you want it, you're probably not going to have to deal with very much snow. So unless you're an idiot like me, who when I retire, we're moving to Flagstaff, Arizona. So if you're familiar with Flagstaff, it is desert, but it's also at 7,000 feet elevation. So it does get snow. There's mountains there. So there's quite a bit of snowfall. It gets all 4 seasons, but they're generally not as they're more mild than they are here. Like this, it snows, but it's not like ridiculous. It gets hot, but it doesn't get as hot and humid as it does here in Michigan. The spring is gorgeous. The fall is gorgeous. A million reasons to go check out Flagstaff. But that being said, most people with a brain in their head don't want to go somewhere where move from one state with snow to another one. But that's why the sky's the limit. The southern part of the United States is just full of opportunities for whatever you're looking for. Whether you want a big city, if you just want to be out in the middle of nowhere, the suburbs, you name it, it's there. You can go anywhere. Obviously the Southwest is mostly going to be desert, but California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana is not that much of a retirement destination, but if you want to save money compared to Florida, like the Gulf of Alabama is a really good spot. Like Orange Beach, Gulf Shores is really popular. Even like Mississippi along the Gulf Coast. I mean, there's definitely, you can get the same amenities without having to break the bank. Like if you were going to be in Fort Lauderdale or Clearwater or Tampa, somewhere in those areas, it's quite a bit more affordable in other parts of the country, in other states. And then another thing to think about, if it's going to have to be a personal decision if this is the right lifestyle for you. But I know in Arizona for sure, there's literally entire cities that are 55 and up. Like if you're under 55, you can't even move into the city. So like Sun City West is one that I'm thinking of. But there's in the villages in Florida and Central Florida, I believe you have to be 55 to move in there. So there, if you want that kind of lifestyle where there's no kids, there's no younger people, it's a little bit quieter, slower pace. That's definitely something that's there for you. And if you want the opposite, I mean, nobody's going to put a gun to your head and tell you can't buy a house and next door to somebody that's got 8 kids. I mean, it's totally up to you. But those type of living accommodations are definitely available throughout the more popular retirement destinations in the United States. But long story short, do your homework and I'd travel around, find the right place for you, someplace that you just really love to go visit, make it your home. It's awesome. I mean, that's one of the things I learned kind of early on in life is it's better to live somewhere in a place where people go on vacation. And it really is, it's like I never had a shortage of people wanting to come visit me in Phoenix when I lived there. So especially in wintertime, not so much in summer, but it really is. It's awesome, and that's one of the reasons why I moved to Ferndale as soon as I could when I moved back here, because Ferndale is a destination. People all around Metro Detroit come here on the weekends and at night, and there's nightlife and everything, and it's just a great place to live. That's always been my kind of school of thought, and it's worked well for me personally over the years. But definitely go find the place that looks for you, and then find out where within that area you want to live, and you should be good to go. If you do need recommendations, every state that we've talked about today, I've got a top agent that I personally know that I'm friends with in almost every major market in almost every Sunbelt state. So if it's something where you need a recommendation for anything really, I can reach out, make a couple phone calls, and have somebody really good to be able to help you out there. And then one last thing on snowbird / retirement properties. The one state that I wouldn't sleep on, I would definitely take a look at this, is New Mexico. Like, people don't think about it that much, but it is an incredible state. It's absolutely beautiful there. It's got everywhere from snow-capped peaks to high desert to low desert to cosmopolitan cities. Like Albuquerque is a really nice upscale city. Santa Fe is beautiful and historic. I mean, it's just really a cool state to go check out. So I would definitely go look, drive around that state, and what I found is the climate's a little more mild than, like, Albuquerque specifically compared to Phoenix is a little bit more mild of a climate. It's not quite as, it's not a huge, 4 million person, megalopolis, but it's, still has 500,000 people that live there. It's still a big city. You get all the amenities that you're used to if you live in the city, but it doesn't get quite as hot in summer. It gets a little cooler in the winter, but it's not like crazy freezing cold like it is here. And it's just a gorgeous state with really cool people. It's just, I definitely would recommend it. So check that out while you're at it. And then let's talk about minuses. So something to really think about, like some of the things that we don't really have to think about here in Michigan is, first thing that comes to mind is natural disasters. So, we get, the occasional tornado here and there, but we don't have to deal with earthquakes. We don't have to deal with hurricanes. We don't have to deal with, generally speaking, like mudslides and floods too much. So a lot of the stuff that impacts other parts of the country doesn't impact us here. But if you're going to move to another part of the country, you really want to do your research before you decide to make that move. And crazy story, but it's 100% true, is something to think about even for Arizona. When I lived there, my outdoor hockey game in the desert got rained out by a hurricane. Swear to God, it was some freak occurrence where this hurricane came right up the Sea of Cortez, which is like in between the Baja Peninsula and mainland Mexico, and it was headed straight for Phoenix. So I went into class in the afternoon, and you could see the clouds out in the distance. And then I got out of class an hour later, and the clouds were a whole lot closer, and it like kind of fizzled out right before it got to Phoenix. So we didn't get like the full brunt of a hurricane, but it was really surreal. Like people were like sandbagging their desert driveways and stuff, and there was a couple flash floods, but it's just a weird experience. But you don't think of things like that, but it's possible. The entire Southwest has been in a drought for 20 years. You got hurricanes in Florida and along the Gulf Coast. You got Tornado Alley if you're in Texas. So just think about it. People live there, so it's obviously not uninhabitable, but it's something to think about before you decide to make that move. And then, obviously this goes with any type of property that you're going to buy. Anytime you have a property that's sitting vacant for any period of time is always a target for vandalism. So what I'd recommend, you can go to Costco and get an alarm system for $250 now. The Ring system is good. Simply Safe I like a lot because you don't need to have Wi-Fi connected to the house in order to have the alarm work. So, there's a bunch of different companies, like Cove is another one that the door sensors don't seem to work very good, but the motion detectors are excellent on that. So just, I'd recommend just having some kind of precaution there, because you don't want to like have a house sitting empty and come back to it after 6 months and then it's broken into and ransacked. I mean, that would be terrible. So I don't ever want anybody to get into that situation. So it's better just to take a little bit of precaution before you make that move. And then the last thing that's really affecting certain states other than, more than others, is insurance. And I know that insurance rates vary state by state, but I'm sure we've all heard, California is becoming really expensive to insure a property because of all the wildfires. Florida is becoming incredibly expensive to insure a property because of hurricanes and storm damage and things like that. So, if you're used to insuring your home here in Michigan at a certain basic price point, you want to really, really do your homework before you enter into a contract on a property somewhere else in another state, because insurance could be a much more significant percent of your monthly payment than it would be here. So definitely reach out to a couple insurance agents. I can help you on that as well if you need me to. But we just want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. I don't ever want to see plans, best made plans kind of go to waste, or whatever the saying is on that. I just want to make sure that everybody that watches this channel is set up for success no matter where they go. And as always, thank you so much for watching this, guys. I really appreciate it. This was a fun one to make. It's kind of outside the box of what I normally do, so I had to put a little more research and thought into it. It's pretty fun to make this video. So hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Hope this was helpful. And as always, if you need any questions answered, anything I can ever do for you, easiest thing to do is just call or text me. Direct line is 586-491-5622. You can also email me at derecwerenka@simplyhome.com. Reach out. I'm on all the socials. You can DM me. I'll respond real quick. And until next week, thank you so much for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your summer, and we'll talk soon.